You've tuned in to the 49ers Rush podcast, and here is your host, John Chapman.
All right, thanks for tuning in to the 49ers Rush podcast. Great to be with you guys again. Got an awesome episode today. Today we're going to continue trekking through the draft. Today we're going to be covering Joe Williams, running back out of Utah, that the 49ers selected with the 4th round pick. Actually, we traded up for him, and we'll get into those trade details later. But before we do that, just want to say thanks for joining us so far. This is our 6th installment, and we'll keep working through the draft. And for those of you that haven't already, go ahead and look us up on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, just 49ers Rush Podcast, and hit that subscribe button. If you get a chance to put in a review, that's very helpful as well. Now, a little bit about myself. I am an ex-football coach from Dallas area in Texas and just absolutely love film and decided the coaching route wasn't the way for me and decided to jump into the podcast and writing world. I'm also a contributor over at cover32.com/49ers, so you can check out a lot of my articles there, or you can follow me on Twitter, JL_Chapman. Again, that's JL_CHAPMAN. And the whole idea of this podcast is to create a more informed 49ers fan through film and breaking down things, just going deeper. That's kind of what we're about here. So let's begin with our conversation on Joe Williams. Now, we're going to go through a little bit of the background, how the 49ers acquired him, which is a crazy story in and of itself. And if there's anything that's come up with this new front office with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, is whatever's been normal for NFL standards are literally chunked out of the window. And their accessibility to the media has just jumped up tenfold from what we had with Trent Baalke, which was just terrible in and of itself. But, allowing Peter King of MMQB to step into the draft room and basically spend 24 hours leading up to the draft with our new general manager, John Lynch. And we just have so much insight and information out there now, so enjoy it. Obviously, it's not going to be like this every year. I wish that it would be, but, we found out a lot of crazy stuff about how the process works in the 49ers war room. And so we're going to be going over the background, how we got them. Then we'll jump over to the film breakdown side, and we'll conclude with kind of where Joe Williams fits scheme-wise and what the future with the 49ers looks like, because there's so much out there right now on him. If you're into fantasy football, almost every kind of fantasy football writer or analyst, they're all talking about, man, can Joe Williams take Carlos Hyde? And if so, how long will it take before it happens? And we'll get into that and what that looks like and look into Kyle Shanahan's basically past and how he's divvied up the role between running backs. So that's kind of what we're looking at today. So let's jump in and let's go over how we got this guy, because, man, he's a polarizing figure. You either love him or you hate him, and in the 49ers front office, we had both those. Kyle Shanahan absolutely was adored with this guy and basically begged John Lynch, the general manager, to get him, in which case John Lynch didn't even have him on his board. And so he was completely removed from his board and did not want him at all. And at the end of the 2nd round, after the 3rd round concluded, head coach Kyle Shanahan said, "I'm telling you right now, if we don't get him, Joe Williams, I'll be sick." He said that he was thinking about Joe Williams the entire night leading up into the 3rd day of the draft. And so let's talk about this, because as the draft concluded on the 2nd night, 3rd round's over. We've got our, 4 picks already taken care of, which is awesome. And we're going into the next day. And Lynch did not even have this guy on his draft board. We also saw the 6 traits to being a 49er, which is like a really cool little card and thing that John Lynch put out there about what it means to be a 49er. We're going to talk about those 6 traits and how pretty much every one of them does not meet the requirements of Joe Williams. Hopefully we will go through the transformation from where John Lynch started and where he ended with Joe Williams. Number 1, what it means to be a 49er. Football passion. Do they love it? Well, Joe Williams retired from football in college, so that's going to be a huge X there. Now, we'll get into the details for why that took place, but that is a fact. He actually retired from the game of football and walked away from it. Number 2 requirement, contagious competitiveness. Now, on film, this shows out. This guy is a baller, and we'll get into that. But, again, the idea of walking away from your team, that's going to be a big X there, too. Number 3, dependability, protect the team. Absolutely not. Does not meet those requirements. Mental toughness does not. And we'll get into why this was the case and why John Lynch was able to look past this. Number 5, football IQ. If you were judging off of his 2015 film, you would have a gigantic X mark. Fumbles, he fumbled so much in 2015, and he'd run routes and run out of bounds short of the sticks. Just lots of mental errors, but whenever you put on last year's tape after the retirement, these seem to almost disappear. So this could be a check mark and probably the only one of the 6 traits that actually he does meet the criteria on, but in 2015 he would not. And the last one for traits to be a 49er is accountability to other players and to themselves, which again, first glance, he misses out on 5 of these 6 criteria. Now let's get into what actually happened, okay? Funny thing about Joe Williams is he's been everywhere. Military academy kid, goes to UConn to play football there, gets kicked off the team because he stole his teammate's credit card, which is, there's a whole bunch of rumors about what actually happened and what didn't actually happen, whatever, but regardless, he gets kicked off of the team. Jumps over to a smaller school to play for a little bit, then goes to Utah, and at Utah, they had a lot of depth, and played for Kyle Whittingham, used to coach for Notre Dame, and he didn't get a lot of carries in 2015. And then what happens is he jumps out the last 3 games and he takes that starting job. And so we're going into 2016 and the expectation is this guy's going to be the key starter. Well, that doesn't happen. After a couple fumbles and again running out of bounds kind of early before the sticks, things like that, fumbles again and loses his job to a freshman running back. And this is where things go downhill. He basically, things are bad and then all of a sudden he decides, I've got to leave. I've got to retire, coach. There's a lot of stuff going on, and what we found out was basically his sister passed away whenever he was 13, and he was kind of blaming himself for that. He fell asleep the night that she died, and he never was able to get past that. And so he decided that he had to step away from football in order to deal with these things that were going on inside, because if he didn't get them dealt with, who knows what would have happened. It just was not a healthy situation. So he stepped away, says that he met with a psychiatrist, went through some therapy, basically got his life in order. And it was right about this time, after spending time on himself, Kyle Whittingham, Utah head coach, calls him and says, hey, bud, we've got a lot of injuries. We need you back with our family. We need you back on our team. And Joe Williams, he came back after having a month off from football. You wouldn't expect to happen what had happened, but Joe Williams came on record and said, I'm doing all of this for my sister. I'm running for my sister. I am playing for my sister. All of my dedication is for her. And so he comes back, and in his last 7 games, he just goes bananas. First game back, 179 yards rushing versus Oregon State. Next game, broke a Rose Bowl record against UCLA and rushed for 332 yards and 4 touchdowns, which, if you want to know the upside of Joe Williams, go watch the film, go watch the game film. Him against UCLA, it seems like it's a highlight reel film, but it's game film. Every single touch that guy gets is just almost to the house. Next game, 172 yards versus Washington. Fourth game back, 181 versus Arizona State. Fifth game, 149 yards versus Oregon. The only game out of these 7 was 97 that didn't reach 100 yards, 97 yards versus Colorado, and that's a stingy defense. And then the bowl game, 220 yards versus Indiana, and if you watch that game, man, he willed his team to victory. It's a back and forth, just great bowl game. And he fumbled in the fourth quarter whenever his team was up, trying to fight for extra yards, and Indiana gets it, goes back, kicks a field goal. They're up by 1 with 2 minutes left. And you watch that final drive. I put some clips on my Twitter feed that show you just breaking 3 to 4 tackles per run. And it might just be 10 to 15 yards. But he willed his entire team all the way down close to the goal line and kicked the game-winning field goal. I mean, he won that game for them. If you want to see how dependable this guy is, you just got to go back and watch that. And now this is the thing. And so we see what happens whenever he came back. And this is the reason why a lot of teams were scared of Joe Williams, because they didn't understand why he stepped away. If you look at it just from afar and you see, oh, well, he retired and quit on his team, that makes perfect sense. And that's kind of where John Lynch was. Now, Kyle Shanahan had been doing a lot of homework, and he was getting the running backs coach basically in there, and it says the running backs coach basically became his surrogate uncle, which is just beautiful. And that's what this is about. Kyle Shanahan was going after this kid, learning everything that he could, and Lynch was a little bit behind. And so Lynch said, you know what I got to do? I got to call. I got to call and talk to this guy because he's not even on my board. And he didn't cut any words. He goes in and tells him, he calls Joe Williams up on the phone, this is before the draft, and says, I'm going to be honest with you, kid. I'm done with you. You're not even on my board. Tell me what happened. And they go into this long conversation, and the thing that Lynch took away from it is that Joe Williams didn't make any excuses. He went and said, look, here's the situation. This happened with my sister. I blame myself, and it took a toll on me. And it's been something that's bothering me my whole life, and I've dealt with it, and now that's my purpose. And so I'm back. So the idea of saying that he really quit on his football team, man, that's a rough statement to make. And with all the conversations with the running back coach, Bobby Turner, for the 49ers, like, he's got this support system set up now. And so this is where it gets awesome, because John Lynch gets off of the phone after speaking with Joe Williams and says, screw it, I'm going to jump up and get this guy. You talk about a complete 180. And if you want to look into what the 49ers front office has now, you have a general manager that has a game plan, but he's not set in stone on that game plan. He's going to listen to his head coach's wants and needs and figure out a way. And the 49ers offense has been god-awful for a while now, and for the first 3 picks of our draft, we go defense. We don't really have a long-term answer at quarterback. We don't really have long-term studs at receiver. We've got some holes in the O-line and all these things. Shanahan gets what they are doing. They're there on 6-year contracts. They're not trying to win right now. They're trying to build something for the future. And so whenever Kyle Shanahan does speak up, it's awesome to have a GM that listens in that relationship. And we're starting to see the benefits of that. So again, John Lynch comes out and says, screw it. I'm going to jump up and get this guy. And they do. They trade. Let's go over the trade details now. We traded a 4th-round pick, number 143 overall, and a 5th-round pick, number 161 overall. And we jumped up 22 spots in the 4th round to grab this guy. Now, if you want to look at the old Jimmy Johnson trade chart, basically the picks that we gave up were worth 34 points and 26 points. So if you add those together, 60 points. Now, what we traded up to, number 121, was worth 52. So we were on the short end of this deal. We lost out 8 points, which is equivalent to like one of the last 6 rounders. So not that big of a deal as far as value goes, but we did overpay. And this is a testament to how much John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan really wanted this guy. And so we jump up and we draft Joe Williams, number 121 overall. Now, to put this into perspective, these are the running backs that are still on the board at this point. Jamal Williams went to Green Bay. Wayne Gallman went to the Giants. Marlon Mack, basically the Frank Gore successor, if he ever does retire. I love Frank the Tank, man. And Jerry McNichols. These are 4 studs that are probably going to be starters in the next 2 years. We drafted Joe Williams ahead of them. And hopefully this will turn into another late round running back Shanahan gem, going back to his father, drafting Alfred Morris in the 6th round, Mike Anderson in the 6th round, Terrell Davis in the 6th round, and Kyle already has a little bit of a history with this. One, he was on the coaching staff in Houston whenever they brought on Arian Foster as an undrafted free agent, one of the greatest undrafted free agent running backs of all time. He was one of the guys that brought him in. Now, he wasn't there whenever he had all the success, but he saw the talent, brought him in. Also, you saw what he did with Steve Slayton there, turned him into a 1,000-yard running back. And whenever he left, Slayton basically fell out of the NFL. When he was with Atlanta, Tevin Coleman in the 3rd round, we're seeing what he's doing and how dynamic he is. Also, Alfred Morris, he was there coaching with his father whenever they got Alfred Morris as well. So there's a huge history already with the Shanahans and late-round running backs. So let's see. Hopefully that will continue here with Joe Williams. Now, let's jump forward now. Let's talk about player evaluation and scheme fit. So, real quick, I had Joe Williams, who's 5'11", 210 pounds. He's fast, and it shows on film. He came away with a 4.41 40-yard dash, and, man, if he had 3 more chances, I mean, he's a borderline 4.3 guy. I don't even like calling him 4.4 because, there's running backs that run like 4.49, 4.48. He's a tier ahead of them. He has something that shows up on film, and you can see it with the